Okay. That's Joe Oliver, the Minister of Natural Resources, on the show saying Tom Mulcair's got it all wrong about the oil sands when he touched off this debate about the Dutch disease and sustainable development. Mulcair argues that the way that these oil sands are being developed is unsustainable, and it's also hurting manufacturing. Joe Oliver is now arguing that, well, not only he's getting got it wrong, but the tailings ponds will be, you'll be able to drink and fish from them soon. That's how clean it all is. Is there an honest tempered debate going on about how to develop the oil sands or not? Well, let's find out what two people say. In Toronto, Jamie Ellerton of Ethical Oil is here. He thinks Mulcair's got it wrong. Keith Stewart, coordinator of Greenpeace's climate campaign, he thinks Mulcair's got it right. Well, we'll find out where they stand on Joe Oliver now. Keith, you support the NDP's Tom Mulcair's Dutch disease argument. What did you make of Joe? Tell me about that and how your thoughts on Joe Oliver on the tailings ponds.
Well, I mean, I was really surprised. The only tailings pond that they've actually sort of restored, although not to the original ecosystem, they simply moved the water from that tailings pond to another one. They've been there for 40 years. We haven't cleaned up any of them yet. The ponds keep getting bigger. It's 170 square kilometers. I mean, I think you'll see the Sydney tar ponds being fished in before you're going to see the tailings ponds in Alberta. And this is one of the issues where we keep making the problem worse without actually having a solution to it. And why we think we actually need to take a more measured approach, look at other alternatives. And, I do think that in raising something like what are the economic costs of the tar sands, because they are there, this is an important debate to have. And the funny thing in this country is when it comes to the oil sands, there's all sorts of things you're simply not allowed to say. If you say it, you're going to be jumped on. That's what Thomas Mulcair, like saying some jobs are lost by a resource boom. That's known around the world. It's called the Dutch disease. The PEM Institute just labeled it oil sands fever. There are costs on the economic side as well, and we need to look at those and actually talk about them and have a democratic discussion about them, rather than having the government trying to shout people down or the oil industry trying to shout people down saying, oh no, that you can't possibly say those words.
Jamie.
What I think we have here, Evan, is what I'm going to call a radical's rash, where you have environmental organizations that are picking and choosing their economics they choose to use as they apply it. I think if you look at the state of manufacturing, not only in Ontario and Quebec, but also in neighboring Michigan and Ohio, this is a malaise that's kind of setting in North American manufacturing. And a lot of developed worlds are facing this situation as they try and compete with cheaper labor costs, quite frankly, in Asia. So I don't think Dutch disease is real. I think this is political expediency on Thomas Mulcair's part. And I'm hoping tomorrow, after he meets the men and women who actually produce Canada's ethical oil, he'll correct his comments and have something else to say.
What do you make of Joe Oliver's comments, though? I mean, let's. I'm trying to get at some a kind of reasoned public debate here, Jamie. But when the Natural Resources Minister says something like that, now to be honest, he said afterwards, if I'm wrong, I'm sure someone will correct me. But to go out there, it was only he said that after I challenged him, saying that's just not factually correct. What's your view when you hear someone say you'll be able to fish and drink from the tailing ponds?
I'm optimistic that one day that will be true, Evan. I know if you look at, for example, Suncor this year is investing $1 billion in a technology called TRO that mixes a chemical agent with the tailings that separates that from the water, which creates a solid substance so that water actually can be reused and put back into the ecosystem. There's tons of other projects involved through industry right now. They're investing billions of dollars themselves to address this real issue. I know it's a regulatory requirement from the government of Alberta that they must reduce their tailing size, and so when you look at the way industry is constructively working with reasonable environmentalists to improve this technology, improve the science so that we can address this issue, I'm optimistic that one day that is true. But
so would you actually agree that the oil companies should have to meet Alberta's requirements, submit plans that will meet those? Because most of them, in fact, are not. The review that the PEM Institute, one of those reasonable groups that you like to point to, did of the tailings ponds management proposal, the plans put forward by the major oil companies, most of them did not, in fact, meet existing Alberta regulations, and the Alberta government said, get back to us when you think you can, get back to us later about that.
Evan, I think if you look at industrial development throughout the world, there's going to be an environmental impact. The real issue here is how do we address this environmental impact? And one of the things that makes Canada's oil ethical oil is that we actually care about these issues. If you look at a place like Nigeria, which Thomas Mulcair said Canada's oil sands are modeled after, they have 2,000 unreclaimed oil spills that will never be cleaned up. In Canada, that would not be tolerated. We do have regulations. And when you look at the issue of tailings ponds, industry itself is investing billions of dollars in various types of technology. And if you look at organizations like the Canadian Oil Sands Innovation Alliance, organizations like that will allow them to share best practices and address these concerns in a common front.
Just for the record, can I just get at this? Maybe I'll ask both of you. It's true what Jamie says. You've got Syncrude and Suncor, huge companies. They are investing billions in technology to reclaim fens, to reclaim watersheds, and to deal with the tailings ponds. Have they been successful? And there have been some areas where they've actually done that. I mean, there's 170 square kilometers. But from a Greenpeace perspective, is it possible to actually restore those to clean drinking water if they made the proper investment?
So let's not go with Greenpeace's perspective. Let's look at the peer-reviewed literature. And the stuff that's been published by, including from academics in Alberta, are saying, no, they will not be restored to their former ecological system. There's a huge destruction of wetlands, which has major ecological impacts. It also has a huge carbon impact because the boreal forest is actually a larger carbon sink than the rainforest because of the peat moss, etc. So those types of things you simply can't, put back. But
so even there's some projects like Sandhills and Pond 1, for example, that Syncrude and Suncor have worked on. Are those examples of, I mean, there has been land reclamation. I'm just trying to get at the facts here.
Yeah, but I think if you look at any industrial process does have tailings ponds, and that's unfortunate. There's an environmental impact, but industry is actually taking a constructive look. The technology is still experimental. There's some really encouraging results. Specifically, I would point to Suncor's TRO technology that they're introduced this year, where it actually separates the tailings from the water so that it becomes a solid sediment, so that land can be reclaimed.
But I think we need to broaden the discussion here away from just that narrow focus on the tar sands to say, what is our energy strategy going to be? Are we going to be accelerating that shift to renewable energy, which we know we need if we're going to stop climate change, which we know is going to be the major challenge for the 21st century? Is Canada going to be a part of that, or are we going to be trying to cling to the 20th century energy sources, investing and massively expanding the tar sands, or are we going to be investing in renewables?
Anyone taking a real honest perspective on this knows that we are going to be continuing to relying on fossil fuels, and particularly oil, for the next 20 to 30 years. So I think we have a choice to make. We can continue to rely on OPEC tyrants to import our oil from off the East Coast, or we can rely on Canada's ethical oil, which comes from the oil sands.
Yeah, but I got 10 seconds here, but isn't Tom Mulcair saying, sure, rely on it, but just develop it sustainably? Jamie?
Yeah, I think if you look at some of Thomas Mulcair's statements comparing Canada's model being after Nigeria's, quite frankly, that's ill-informed, and I hope when he's in Alberta tomorrow and after he meets these men and women, he'll apologize. Industry is collaborating with government and civil society to work constructively to deal with these challenges, Evan, and I think that's one of the things that's one of these things.
Okay, I got 10 seconds, Keith, to respond to that. Should Tom Mulcair apologize for those comments or continue?
Absolutely not. He has said we should have a price on pollution for every industry in this country.
You should actually be honest with me.
And
you
so
really think Canada's industry is modeled after Nigeria?
Okay, Keith, I want to hear the last 5 seconds from Keith there, Jamie. Real quick, Keith.
I think that it's important that we actually have a discussion on things like putting a price on pollution, making polluter pay, looking at the kind of energy future we want. That's the debate that started here, and it's one we shouldn't have government and their proxies shutting it down.
To say that Canada's industry is modeled after Nigeria is absurd, and I think Thomas Mulcair owns Canadian.
All right, Jamie Ellerton, Keith Stewart, don't worry, it's the beginning of a national debate that's kicked off. We'll have you both back. A very interesting debate, and I appreciate both of your time today. Thanks so much. We got lots more in Power Politics coming up. Stay with us.
CBC News digs into the epidemic of bullying in our schools with full coverage on radio, TV, and digital. Share your stories on Facebook and Twitter. Watch, listen, act. Bully-proof, continuing coverage on CBC News.